Hi, everybody. Welcome to a little bit of a market overview, right? A little market recap video that I wanted to make. Happy Sunday. I hope you're all having a good day. I wanted to make this video because I want to give everybody just sort of my perspective on where we are on the market as a whole right now. What some potential moves to look for in the indices, and then some individual stocks that I'm looking at and some potential plays on them as well, right? So we had a really interesting week last week with the market. We had a whole lot going on, right? So it was OPEX week, meaning that monthly options expired last week. So there was a lot of movement that was just based around options expiration, and quad witching was also that week, which means futures contract expired, right? So a lot of manipulation came last week. We also had the FOMC meeting, which pumped us to new all-time highs and then subsequently brought us down 75 points in a few days on the S&P 500, right? So we had a really positive reaction at first, and then predictably that turned into a negative reaction where we saw some sell side to end the week, right? So I wanted to make this video just sort of to explain what I am keeping my eye on for this upcoming week. Some levels to watch for tomorrow in particular, and then some individual stocks, right? So let's get right into it with um, the ES and break down what exactly I'm looking for, right? So the hourly is in a tough spot here on ES because the only true support that we have on the hourly is down here around 37.09, right? And so we do have something right here. We have an hourly trend change that occurred around 38.90s, right? And that's from Friday. But again, Friday was movement was OPEX based, a lot of it, right? So it's tough to interpret is essentially how I want to describe the action on Friday. It's tough to interpret because we don't know what was necessarily driving it. That being said, we do have another minor trend change here, 3860s, 3863s. But aside from that, we do have room to sell if we want to, right? So if futures open up and consolidate down at the lows, then I'm going to be under the impression that this week we are going to see some sell side early in the week, right? Now, ES can solve this problem by gapping up over this trend change up here, 39.13-ish area, right? If we can gap up over that, then we have some room to get back to the upside, get back in an hourly uptrend, use this as a higher low. We were just filling the gap, right? All of that is on the table. I don't want to take any of it off the table. And so the reality is that this week, a lot of it, we'll just have to wait and see how we open up, right? So if we can get over 39.13s early in the week and start developing an hourly uptrend and stay in that, then the odds of 4,000 this week are on the table, right? We're over 100 points away, so it would take a big move and probably require some sort of catalyst. I don't know what that would be, but it's not off the table. And a retest of all-time highs is definitely not off the table, right? We're close enough that we can make a push on the S&P to make a move up there. But that being said, we start losing 38.60s. We start getting hourly closes below there. And we have some room to sell if we want to, right? We absolutely have some room to the downside. And the daily tells us the same story, right? The daily tells us that this area that we tested here, we didn't spend a whole lot of time in there down here. So if we wanted to come set a clean higher low on the daily, right, it can be anywhere in this area and we can come sell down to these areas, right? So a lot of potential opportunity this week, both to the up and downside. I think the key will be letting Monday play out, being patient on Monday, letting it play out, sitting back. And then later in the week, once we get some clarity, coming in with a little bit more size, a little more confidence with the directions that we're going to be taking, right? So that's the ES. Now, the other one that we have to check is the NASDAQ, right? Because the NASDAQ, unlike the ES, did not get all-time highs on that breakout, right? We did clear and get get daily higher highs, which is nice. We even filled a gap, I believe, right here, and so that was nice. But I don't like the rejection from this area, right? If we were truly as bullish as we wanted to believe after the Fed day, then we would have held this upper region, right? We would have made it up here and cleared this higher high and held it up there. Breaking above and then giving that back isn't super encouraging to me. It's not damning, but it's not super encouraging. I've been of the mindset for a while that the NASDAQ needs to break this low and then ultimately find a new swing low around 12,000 and make its way back up. I don't know if that still necessarily needs to happen because we did get a higher high on the daily, but with this pullback now, it sort of wonders like, okay, where can we go, right? If this area holds here, the NASDAQ has a general level I've been watching around 12,750. If that holds, then bulls can feel good, right? It held on Friday. We stayed above it for most of the day. The dips below were bought up quickly. If we can continue to hold above that level, then bulls have substance to their thesis, right? And even down here to 12 550s, if we can hold, this is a common pattern called an inverse head and shoulders, right? It's usually too obvious to actually play out, but um, this is the shoulder, this is the head, this is the shoulder, right? And the idea would be that it's a low followed by a new low followed by a higher low, right? Which would get us back into an uptrend. And this would be a powerful pattern on the daily. Just is it too obvious? That is something that, yeah, I think it definitely could be too obvious, right? But we want to keep it open, right? So if the NASDAQ starts pulling back early in the week, it's not damning for it. But if we start losing this 12,550s areas, I think you can make a case that there's a good chance we'll take a 200 or 300 point drop down and retest the lows from this general area, right? So the NASDAQ hasn't been nearly as strong as the other indices. The Russell and the Dow have been catching up at a really quick pace. And to me, those are still the indices to watch, right? You want to keep your eye on the NASDAQ, but for long opportunities, they're presenting themselves more easily, at least for short-term trades, I should say, in the NASDAQ, in the Russell and the Dow. What you want to look for in the NASDAQ is names that are not necessarily following this weakness that the NASDAQ is seeing, right? So that actually takes us to the first individual stock that I wanted to look at, which is Facebook, right? The reason I want to take a look at Facebook is because Facebook was not following the NASDAQ this last week. It was breaking out of a daily consolidation period and up towards new highs, right? It doesn't have new highs yet, but if the market has any strength this week, I have to imagine Facebook gets new highs relatively early in the week, I would say, if the market has strength. So, Facebook, what am I looking for here? Well, let's get down to the hourly and look at a specific level that we're looking for a break over. 4 hour. Right, so 291.27, I believe it is the level that 291.29, excuse me. 291.29 is the level that I'm watching for a move up towards this 300 area, right? So this is the level that it created on Friday. This is the resistance zone that we have from there, right? And above this is really not much. We have a level here. I believe this is like a 295 level that I've targeted before on Facebook, and we haven't been able to get there. 294.23, and then we have this all-time highs levels up towards 300s, right? But to me, we've broken the hourly uptrend is up, the daily uptrend is breakout, the weekly looks fantastic. So Facebook, if the market has any strength this week, expect Facebook to push the highs, in my opinion. This 304.60s levels and possibly even up higher. It's been consolidating for months now. So it's built the power that it needs to get strength in this move, right? So Facebook is absolutely a top long watch. Again, 291.3s and 294.23s is the levels that we want breaks over towards, so we can get clearance towards the 300s and above, right? So Facebook is absolutely a top long watch this week, mainly because of its relative strength compared to the NASDAQ, right? So another name that I'm watching is Square Cash. If you've traded with me at all, you know that I really love Square Cash. This is one of my favorite stocks to trade because I love the intraday volatility and I love the way the movement that it has. It follows technicals really well. So similar to the NASDAQ, the pattern that I'm looking for here is an inverse head and shoulders, right? So Square, unlike Facebook, has had relative weakness, right? It hasn't been following the NASDAQ or it has been following the NASDAQ down. It hasn't been following the relative strength of the S&P 500, which is what Facebook has been doing, right? But it is presenting us with a potential pattern here. If this general 210.20 area holds, we could see a potential move and break back above 250s and back to 280s and 300 and up towards the 300s relatively quickly in my mind. This is a stock that moves quick. Let's not forget earlier last week, it was at 250, right? And it's down $25 from that price. So it's down 10% like intra-week, right? So it can absolutely make these moves quickly, right? We've seen it time and time again. So the line in the sand for me on Square, let's see, I believe it is, yeah, the level that it created on Friday is if that holds, right? If this general area 225s, and really you can call it 220 for a round number, I think, because you'd want to see that low break. Below that low of 219.52, 220 general area, I think that you could look for a square short all the way back down until the 190s 200 area, right? A higher low around 200 would make a whole lot of sense in my book. So Square is on watch in both directions, right? Because it has been weak compared to the rest of the market, but it also has this pattern. So if this area holds, I would look to potentially take it long up through a break of this pattern, right? Then catch it back, a move to the upside, ultimately filling this gap to the upside as our target, right? So Square is one that can be played in either direction, but I really like it for potential move down if the market is weak, and if the market has strength, and especially if Bitcoin is strong as well, because of Square's ties to Bitcoin, I like it for a move up to break out of this inverse head and shoulder pattern as well. All right, so we get some water, and then we'll talk about my last pick that I'm watching this week. So ABBV is the last one, and I'm looking to add to my shares position here, right? So I actually took some options on this last week. I bought some dated calls for May, and then like the next day they had some tough news where one of the drugs in their pipeline they're not going to be following through with it or something along those lines. Nothing that concerns anybody actually long term, but enough of short term news to cause a drop. So my call options are probably not going to make me going to be profitable in the end. That's fine. Because really what I love about ABBV is their dividend as a short-term play, right? They're one of the lists, they're on my list here of stocks that I am building a sort of a little portfolio of, right? ABBV is actually one of my largest holdings. The reason why is it has a great dividend. It's very stable, and it's shown that during times of overall market weakness, especially when the S&P 500 is weak, the money rotates into names like this because they're names of safety, right? They have a high dividend. They're not going to see massive volatility, right? So I like to have a little bit of that in my portfolio as well, right? So we start on the weekly chart, and the weekly is not pretty, right? We'll get a fresh drawing set up here, right? It's not pretty, especially because it tests higher and then closes lower, right? So on the surface, it's not pretty. But if you start to go underneath the surface a little bit, nothing really that bad happened, right? We're still holding this previous high range, right? And we just fell right into a support range, right? So for me, being someone who's bullish on the stock long term, talking 5-10 years, and they have a 5% dividend yield, I'm comfortable buying shares in this general area, right? Anywhere in the 100 area, I'm comfortable buying shares, right? Because again, we just traded right into a daily support zone, right? And it's entirely possible that we could break down and head back towards this gap. I don't think that's off the table. With the current market conditions, that's not something that I see to be super on like a big risk, right? Now we'll start getting evidence more of that if we lose like below 97.5. Maybe I'll start to reconsider where I'm adding my shares and be a little bit more patient. But for now, this is a company that, based on the fundamentals and the chart, I'm comfortable adding shares to a long-term portfolio up here. Again, above all else, the dividend sort of covers you in a sense, right? That 5% dividend really is really nice, especially for me, someone who has a portfolio that's a little more heavy on growth stocks that are a little more exposed to market conditions like right now. It's nice to have a dividend in a stable name, right? So this whole general area for ABBV, the closer to 100 you can get, I think, the better. But specific levels on the hourly, there's a trend change that we have right here. So the 103 region, 103.10, I think is a perfectly good region to pick up some shares, right? We'll have to see how this opens tomorrow. I know there'll be some people that say, you're buying too high on this still, or let the earnings gap let that gap consolidate a little bit. And I totally agree. But again, for me, this is almost more of a fundamental play than anything, which is that near these prices, I'm comfortable owning ABBV And I'm also comfortable selling call contracts, knowing that the stock doesn't really move in an explosive fashion. I'm comfortable selling call contracts against my shares positions to generate some incomes, right? And that's referred to as a covered call. Uh, and so, yeah, so ABBV is on my list of stocks to watch. And this is a little bit more of a safer play. A little bit, it's one that I feel is a little more long term looking, a little more fundamental based, right? So, just to review again, right, we have our different scenarios that we're looking for on the ES, right? Potential downside, potential upside, the levels that we're watching there. We are watching the NASDAQ for this potential inverse head and shoulders pattern, right? And potential breakthrough. And that is on our watch. If this area holds, we do like the NASDAQ longs. Um, Facebook is a top long watch based off its relative strength of last week. I mean, this chart just looks great. It has a ton of room to make more stronger moves to the upside. Square Cash, we're looking for a similar pattern that we are on the NASDAQ, the inverse head and shoulders. And if we see a breakdown, this does provide us a nice potential short trade to a higher low of around 200. And if that doesn't hold, we could definitely see some more downside towards the 185 region on Square. And then ABBV is one of the long-term plays that I'm looking at this week to add to, or to continue to add to my position there, and then look to get into a covered call against the shares that I have. All right. So overall, this week can go a whole lot of ways. I think that we can see, as we talked about, we can see upside, we can see downside, and remaining nimble and remaining cash on your short-term accounts, not really taking too many swing positions overnight, focusing more on the day trades because the volatility has been great. The day trades really are there. Um, Focusing on those, I think, is something that can really be helpful with all of your success. And then the biggest thing is capital protection, right? In weeks where there are poor market setups and we're just trying to stay alive, capital protection is more important than making money, right? So if you survived the up and down swings of last week, then you protected your capital and you did your job, right? And you succeeded in that job, right? If you over traded something like I personally did myself, I over traded a bit, I oversized a bit despite knowing that I shouldn't have. I ultimately came out the week red when I shouldn't have been because there was enough opportunity to come out green. You need to step back and really remember, okay, what are the market conditions that I succeed in and where provide me with A plus opportunities where I can deploy my capital in a way to get a good return, as opposed to weeks like last week where the only goal should have been, I'm just going to not lose this week. I'm going to be very, very patient. I'm going to be very, very disciplined. I'm going to walk away much earlier in the day, right? So as a trader, we need to learn how to recognize these situations, especially ones that work well with our own style, right? So with that being said, I hope you all enjoyed this this Sunday recap. I'm going to start doing these weekly is my plan. I enjoy doing them. They help me prepare for the week, and I hope that they help you prepare for the week as well. And with that being said, let's make some money this week, team. All right. So cheers. I'll see you all soon.